And I'll begin reading there with the 12th chapter, verses 13 through 17. Later, they sent some of the Pharisees and Herodians to Jesus to catch him in his words. They came to him and said, "Teacher, we know that you are a man of integrity. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are, but you teach the ways of God in accordance with the truth. Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not? Should we pay or shouldn't we?" But Jesus knew their hypocrisy. "Why are you trying to trap me?" he asked. "Bring me a denarius and let me look at it." They brought the coin, and he asked them, "Whose image is this, and whose inscription?" "Caesar's," they replied. Then Jesus said to them, "Give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." And they were amazed at him. May God add a blessing to the reading of his word. Last Tuesday, this country gathered together to hold a national election, and we elected a new president, a new people in Senate and Congress and other political leaders. For the last probably 14, 15, 16 months, we've seen political ads and people running, and we've been trying to do our best diligence to elect the leaders that are most consistent with carrying out what we believe is the will of God. But now, of course, the election is over. And so, now what? Well, some of you may be very excited with the results, and a few of you may not be. But today's passage, I think, really speaks to the involvement in political matters of Christians and how we are to respond to the overall rule of the world. You see, my friends, the leaders in Jesus' day, the politicians, were just as good as those today at using double talk and sweet talk and twisting of words and whatever they could to persuade the public opinion in their capacity. And we see here another example of those politicians coming to Jesus. And their goal in speaking with him is to entrap him, to trick him with their words. So far, they've made several attempts in the gospel to speak to Jesus, to trip him up, to get him in trouble with the masses or the Roman authorities or other people that are in charge. And they're going to fail. They have failed, but they keep trying. And here we have another attempt, a way to publicly embarrass him. And so we have two groups coming together here, the Herodians and the Pharisees. And their two groups normally didn't even get along, but in their common hatred, in pursuit of embarrassing Jesus, they decide to work together. And they had been from some time. Mark chapter 3, verse 6 tells us that they had begun to plot to shame and to kill Jesus. Now, I mentioned before that these two groups most likely didn't always get along. They had very different interests, might be a better way to put it. The Pharisees, of course, were concerned about the law of God, or their interpretation of that. Their main pursuit was that people would look at them and think they were good. And that the things that they were going, they would be puffed up and felt pride that they had followed all the rules. The Herodians were much more concerned with a political agenda. They wanted to keep King Herod and his dynasty in place, and whatever they got to do to make that happen, it was their primary concern with keeping and maintaining that dynasty. Now, each of those groups kind of had a love-hate relationship with Rome. They resented the Roman occupation, but to a certain extent, the Romans allowed them, each of the groups, to have a certain amount of power and prestige, and they kept the peace. And so both those groups and their common disdain for Jesus and the threat that he bore to their power come together and probably sent representatives, probably some of the best talkers among them, the best debaters, and they sent them with this message in order to trap Jesus. And so we come to there with verse 14. They came to him and they said the following, "Teacher, we know you are a man of integrity. You aren't swayed by men because you pay no attention to who they are, but you teach the ways of God in accordance with the truth." Oh, they're so shrewd. They come together there, right? I mean, you know that before they're going to try to send a dagger in his back, they're going to puff him up, and try to make him sound so good, like they say all these nice things first. And really, they're also trying to look at the crowd around that's gathered around and really increase their expectations, like, oh, wow, what is he going to say? Because they're hoping that Jesus is going to say something, that they're going to get to say something that's going to cause a reaction in the crowd to sort of turn against Jesus. And then they come to the question, the reason that they're here, what they think is a great question to finally trap him and to trick him. Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Should we pay or shouldn't we? Now, I think I don't have to tell you that paying taxes is a controversial subject. I don't know. Does anyone here enjoy paying taxes? No hands are going up. Now, usually we kind of do it reluctantly. No one's like, oh boy, it's time to pay our taxes. Oh, I can't wait. So no one really likes to pay the taxes. And of course, the Jewish people that day didn't like paying taxes any more than we do. And in fact, their system was much more corrupt than our system is presently. Because their system, by its very nature, encouraged corruption. You see, to be a tax collector, then you bet on that job, to be a tax collector. And the way that you made your money was that whatever you could get people to pay above what Rome said their take was, you got to keep. How would you like a system where the tax collector's job, they worked on a commission based on how much they could charge you? So as long as the government got their share, whatever they could get out of you above that, they got to keep. So people didn't really like tax collectors. In addition to that, they didn't really like paying taxes to Rome. After all, this was a foreign government, came in, an empire that had conquered them. They have armed soldiers all around their cities and all around it, and that their taxes were going to support the occupation of their nation. And on top of that, there was another element that was of their concern, their religion and their faith, because though they knew they were no longer an independent nation, they understood and believed that they were God's chosen people, that they were his nation. And now that there was this foreign power, they weren't free to really be the people of God. And to some groups, such as the Zealots, they believed that if you paid taxes, that was akin to treason against God. So the Zealots, you might remember, are people that used any means necessary to oppose Rome, even up to and including violent acts. And so to the Jewish people, it was a matter of paying too much taxes, but even more so, it was a matter of who they had to pay the taxes to, which was to Rome, that was causing a great amount of difficulty and problems in their lives and anxiety. And so they're really saying the question is this: who do you owe your allegiance to? Is it to God, or is it to Caesar? And so they're coming to him, and that's really what they're asking Jesus when they're asking him to pay the taxes. If he picks the side of paying taxes, then you're saying we owe this allegiance to Caesar. If you say no, then he's with the side of the Zealots and the people that want to oppose Rome. So he's put in this difficult situation, and the leaders are saying, we're going to get him. Because no matter what he says, he's in a kind of a catch-22. They're ready to pounce on any compromise. You know, the Pharisees are like, if he compromises anything against what God would want, they're going to jump. If the Herodians are going to jump if he says anything sort of that opposes the political structure of that time. And this isn't the last time that the leadership sort of tries this strategy. In fact, in Acts chapter 2, they do something somewhat similar with the Apostle Paul. He was in the temple in almost the same area, and worshipers cried out, "Men of Israel, help us! This man teaches all men everywhere against the people and the law and the place." And it doesn't matter that Paul hadn't done those things, but that the leaders were in the temple, that they cried out, that they made accusations. Because if you say a lie convincingly enough, people will go along with it. And so there was a mob, and they wanted to kill Paul. Of course, God did not allow that at that time, but it's a similar type strategy that is being used here. The religious leaders are hoping we can arouse this mob, and they're going to threaten and hurt Jesus and deal with this problem, their perceived problem of Jesus. So if Jesus would say something in support of the taxes, they could cry out, "Men of Israel, help us. This man is trying to tell us that Rome is our God." We need to do something about it or rise up the mob. But if he says, don't pay taxes, then they can say something like, no taxes, no taxes, no taxes. I'll rise up the crowd and surely bring down the authority of Rome upon Jesus. So no matter what he answers, they're going to rile up someone and Jesus is going to get in trouble. They think they have him, but of course they don't. Jesus knew what they were doing the whole time. He knew what was in their hearts and minds. And so he simply asked them, why are you trying to trap me? And then, as Jesus so often does, he asks them a question. Or he gives them a command, to say, bring me a denarius and let me look at this. Maybe the leaders were thinking, I don't know what he's doing with this. Maybe he's stalling, but here's a coin. And when they brought him the coin, he asked them these questions. Whose portrait is this? Whose inscription? Caesar's. And so Jesus says, give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, but give to God the things that are God. Now, if Jack was here, he told me it was okay to say this. He would say, oh, snap! At least Lyle knows Jack, because that's what he'd say. When he's like, oh man, they got him. Jesus outsmarted them again. And the leaders were amazed. They were speechless. They're sitting there like, oh man, what's a comeback? We got nothing. We did not anticipate this response. And I think we can all appreciate the cleverness of Jesus. And we have to remember the attitude also to coins here in this day, that the coin would bear the image of the emperor. And the current emperor at that time was Caesar Tiberius. And it was common knowledge, or the idea was that the emperor's image, or the emperor whose coin was on that image, that emperor actually owed all that coin. And the fact that eventually it would all go back to the emperor. And so by using those coins, it was sort of a way to remind people that saying that by using it, that you must accept Roman authority. Because every time you look at it, you're reminded that it is Caesar's image on this. And so Jesus has once again vanquished his foes who have engaged him in some sort of witty wordplay. But is that all there is to this message? The message, the moral of this story is, don't try to outsmart Jesus because you're not going to win. Is that the only message? That's an important lesson. We're not going to outsmart Jesus, but is there more to understand here? I think so. When he says, give unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God, he references two things about the coin that he held in his hand. He asked them first about the image on that coin, and then the inscription on that coin. When he talks about the image was something that in the Jewish mind they talked about all the time. An image would definitely make them refer back to the second commandment of the Ten Commandments, in which they're not supposed to have any other image or engravement that you worship. And that would immediately come to the minds of the majority of people in the crowd. And the second, when he talks about the inscription, it would refer back to another practice of the Jewish people, the Shema, that we discussed a few months ago in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. When it says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone." The Jewish people recited that every single day. And they would have definitely been called to the part of the Shema that commands the person to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength, and to inscribe, that was the same word Jesus used here, on your hearts and on your doorposts and on the gates of your city. And so with that reference of their daily affirmation, he's calling back to their attention two very common ideas that the vast majority of the people in the crowd would have been aware of. When he tells them to give unto Caesar the things that are Caesar, he's making a very strong statement. He's challenging those in the crowd to really determine who is their God. To whom do they truly owe their allegiance? Is it to Caesar or is it to God? And so in that question, he's asking them to examine themselves to find the answer. For he has reminded them truly that it is God who has true ownership of all things. The fact is that everything good belongs to God and ultimately needs to return to God. And yet at the same time, Caesar is making the claim that your loyalty, your money, your possessions, the things should belong to the government. Because as Caesar, he was sort of declared as a deity and even demanded a certain degree of almost worship. And so with this simple message, he's saying, you need to make a choice. Is your allegiance with God, or is your allegiance with Caesar? So give to Caesar the things that bear Caesar's image. This coin. Look at it. Whose picture's on it? Caesar's. So give it back to him. It's really of no eternal value. But give to God the things that are God's. What is made in God's image? Human beings, the Bible declares. The people are made in the image of God. And so something that carries far more value than money belongs to God. And so we need to remind ourselves that we belong to God and need to be given back to him. So Jesus is going far more than saying, as I think some commentators that have said, worship God but pay your taxes. He doesn't even talk about taxes. That's the wrong question. The real question is, what is the devotion of your life? Where is your heart, your soul, your strength? Where is your true allegiance devoted? Because God really doesn't care about the things of this earth, the possessions that we have. And so ultimately, we shouldn't care that much either. And I know it's hard. We get attached to those things. We love them and want them, but what God's saying is far more important is our love and our worship and our devotion and our allegiance to him, because those other things will pass away at some point. Only our devotion and allegiance to him will stay. And so, is our allegiance today, is it to the government? Is it to our own money, our wealth, our jobs, our titles, our possessions? Or is our main allegiance to God? And so we give back to the things that this world requires. We give the money back to the people whose money it belongs to, the governments, and we give back our time and our resources, our jobs to those who possess it, and rightly so, that God has established that there is a social order to things. But ultimately, those allegiances are not as important as our allegiance to God. And since we bear the image of God, then we are, by example, sort of like the coin in this story. And God would see sort of like Caesar, who wants to collect all the coins that bear his image. And so this king wants to collect those coins because he wants to put them to good and to noble use. All the coins come back to the ones that bear his image. So friends, if you've ever doubted how valuable you are, if you've ever sort of loathed your own existence or thought yourself of not that important, you have intrinsic value. Because the God who made all things in the entire universe made but a few things that bore his image. And human beings are those things. And so he ultimately wants all human beings who bear his image to have an allegiance to him and ultimately come back to him, because he is the one who gave us intrinsic value. And of course, the important implication of that is then that we must choose to come back to him. Since the fall of humanity, we've all sinned. I don't think there's anyone here that can deny that they have sinned in their lives. But no matter how much sin we've done, no matter how tarnished we've been, no matter how messy and dirty a coin gets, it can be restored. And that's what God is always in the habit of doing. That we are that coin that he takes back, that he cleanses, that he wants to restore shiny and new, to remove all that muck and rust and dirt and restore it to absolutely pristine condition. That's what he wants. And that is what he's doing in the world. That he wants all of you to come back to him. No matter how tarnished you think your life is, he's the one that can clean it up. I know the temptations of this world are strong, and our allegiances to those things like our paychecks and our money and our possessions and our power and our pursuit of pleasure can overtake us at times. But truly, the only allegiance that ultimately matters is our allegiance to God. So when these other things tempt us, remind ourselves that our lives bear not the marks of the pursuit of money or pleasure or government or whatever else, but they have in our lives the image of God. A God who has always been faithful to us and is asking us to be faithful to him. Because, my friends, ultimately, we do not belong to this world, but we belong to the kingdom of God. And we belong to its King, who made us in his image and wants to be with us forever, because that is our hope, that is our identity, and that is our destiny. Let us pray. Lord, may we never forget whose image we are made in, that we belong to you, that you are the one who created us in your image, that you have placed into us value. May we give to the world the things that belong to this world, but may we always give to you, Lord, the things that belong to you. Our lives belong to you, and may we always give the best of ourselves to you, for that is what you deserve. In Jesus' name, amen.